the atrocity of war is horrible, and I think that the way that this particular war is played out is just horrible. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
what's happening; they're beheading babies and doing all of these things. It's horrible. I can't
God
even hardly
damn,
watch
dude.
it. And but on a bigger picture, part of me feels this is being done to drag us into war with Iran, and I don't know how that plays out. There was a show that I watched when I had knee surgery a few years ago. I think it's called 0 Days. I'm almost positive. And it's a story of how the Israeli Mossad and the CIA used something called the Stuxnet virus to infiltrate the Iranian nuclear reactors, the centrifuges. Now, they're centrifuges where they're trying to build a bomb are well fortified underground, and they couldn't get into it. So what did they do? They built a virus, computer virus. They put it into the electrical plant next, that provided electricity to that compound, and it blew up the centrifuges. I think when you speak of a country that like Iran that has aspirations publicly of using a nuclear weapon, I think it's serious, and I think this could drag us into World War III. Could it? Maybe. Will it? Don't know. What does it mean now that Iran is part of the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization? Don't know. There are a lot of don't knows. This is that interesting part of, may you live in interesting times. Interesting
Hmm.
is an interesting way of listing or talking about it, but whatever it is, we're spread very thin. We're a country that's going broke. We don't have the money to support these two wars, even though you could argue maybe, to an extent, these are look, Israel's our ally and has been for a very long time. And do we want to have that vacuum replaced by countries that don't have Western interests at hand? You can take Judaism and Christianity and all of the religious aspects out of it, um, which is hard for me. I'm Jewish. I never even had a bar mitzvah. I'm not religious at all. I'm very spiritual, but it's painful to see what's happening. But I think there's a bigger picture behind it, and hopefully, it doesn't drag us into a big war, a global war, which it very well may. But what ultimately, I look at this at a time when this country is upside down in debt. There's a record 17 trillion in debt, a record 12 trillion in mortgage debt, a record 1.6 trillion in auto debt, a record 1.6 trillion in student debt, which happens to be the largest asset of this bankrupt country. Yeah, you heard me right. It is the largest single asset of the United States, and we are not prepared, I think, for very difficult, tough times. And I think what you could see by this, perhaps, is a acceleration of the BRICS formation to push away from the Western hegemony. I think we will see things very, very. I think things will unfold very, very quickly from this point forward, as it pertains to sides being chosen, alliances that will be formed. Um, I think there's a lot more to meet the eye. That there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. And although we can't see it right now, I think within the next few months we will start to see a lot of things accelerate away from the dollar, away from the West. And I think this country is not in position to handle what that really means, because we are so massively in debt. We have so little in terms of assets. We are spread so thin. We are a divisive country who is not united anymore with one another. We are at each other's throats about everything, even about this war. Is it Israel's fault? Is it Palestine's fault?
Right.
But whose
Jeez.
fault is it? And it's weird that you even have to say this after all of these years, that people wouldn't support Israel. Um, this isn't a political thing. This isn't a Jewish thing. This is just, look at the way, there should be rules of war. And, God forbid, the United States, and I guess maybe, who knows? God forbid the United States would go in and do these types of horrible things to civilians and to little babies and to elderly people. 25 American people are dead. This is something we should be rallying around our ally. And instead, again, we're divisive. This divisiveness will kill the United States. This divisiveness that's the first thing you do in the Communist Manifesto. You divide and conquer. And look at how divided we are on everything. And it's not just division, like, it's more about almost visceral hatred of one another's opinion. And I'm not that way. I come from a home where my family were hippies. My house smelled like weed. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll were just a normal thing to me my whole life. I respect everyone, no matter who you sleep with or what drugs you do or whatever the hell you want. As long as you're not thrusting it upon me, I respect you. I can still hang out with you and go to a party with you or play sports with you or do whatever. It doesn't mean I need to go home with you. Doesn't mean that I need to do the things that you do, but I can still respect you as a person. That's how I grew up, and child of the 70s and 80s. And I'll tell you, that's something that's gone. And I think that is a very bad thing, because we should not be so divided about so many things, in particular, standing up for our allies. And, the Ukraine wasn't our ally the way that Israel has been. And I just think that things are going to get really ugly because of, look, what's going on geopolitically is upside down, and also economically. But that doesn't bother me as much as the divisiveness in this country.
Yeah,
that to me is more frightening than anything else. And we are not prepared to unite against a common threat or a common cause, and with our backs to the wall, rise to the challenge. Instead, we hate each other, we're angry at each other. There's lawlessness. There's no respect for authority. There's no respect for religion. There's no respect for the nuclear family, and everyone's broke and in debt, and rates are rising. This is a bad thing. So I don't know. I don't mean to go on my soapbox.
No,
it's way different than we just talking about silver. But look, I mean,
this is
I think
important.
at some point you have to just accept it and either do the best you can to protect yourself and your family, or get run over by it. And and I think most people don't even see it, and they can't get out of the way of what they don't see coming.
Yeah. This is why the 2024 election is so important, and I was going to say, I think that a lot of people are even scared to say the stuff that you're saying, especially publicly,
I think about that a lot. Like, am I stupid for saying this stuff? I'm sure I'll get shit for it. I don't know.
No.
It tells me it has to be said.
Exactly. And social media plays a huge part in a lot of this, but going back real quick, you said a lot of stuff that is important. You talked about the why. I could say silver's going to hit triple digits next year, but if I want to explain why I'm saying that, it's not saying much, and that separates the true stackers from the people that just hop on the hype train, like the Wall Street silver hype train. Because if you don't understand why, you're going to panic sell. You're not going to have that faith. You need confirmation and validation that it can go up. And when it doesn't, then you end up, freaking out. When silver goes down to $11 in March of 2020, I'm celebrating when a lot of people are freaking out, because I understand silver's true value, and more importantly, the dollar's true value. And then you talked about the macro as well. When I was on Robert Kiyosaki's podcast, that was something I brought up a lot. He was focused on the micro, and I was focused on the macro. And actually, the next day he tweeted about that, which is funny. But I think that those two together, a lot of people just focus on one or the other, but those two together is what makes silver so, have so much potential, opportunity behind it. So I'm glad that you're also on board with that, because no one really talks about that. And when I watch channels, they focus on the micro a lot.
Micro is the
But
worst thing to focus on as it pertains
exactly,
to accumulation of
it's the
precious
bigger
metals, because
picture.
unless you're a trader, if you are
Yeah,
swing trading,
exactly.
yes, it should be
Exactly.
important.
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
macro is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, the micro is the game within the game. The macro is the
Yeah.
game. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's there are times to look at micro, I guess, but the macro perspective, the broader perspective, to me is the only thing that really matters. Um, and that's why very often I repeat myself, and that's why
Yeah.
very often I'm early. I've been saying, you know, there was a time in 2019, late 2019, 2020, where I'm the only person out there talking about the BRICS. My wife grabs me by the ear and says, you know, you're saying the same shit over and over and over again. I said, but no one is talking about it. It's so
Exactly.
important. Look at what's happening. And now everyone talks about it.
Right.
I wasn't talking micro back then. I was talking a big picture, de-dollarization, the rise of the Belt Road, the reclassification of gold, and now all these countries joining together, buying gold and repatriating it. Something big is happening here. Yeah, the micro, you could look at each one of these pieces, but to me, you take those pieces and put them together and they say a much bigger thing.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just the pieces in and of themselves don't have the same significance as all of them put together. And then looking at them, oh geez, could this all be part of a bigger picture? That to me is the most important thing. And the
Yeah.
people who get upset when silver falls don't understand it, or they own it for the
Exactly.
wrong
Right.
reasons. And you know, you have a little girl, she's just a few years old, and if I were you, I would be accumulating silver every chance I
Yeah.
get, and hope to heaven I never need to use it. If I do,
Yeah.
not just for an emergency, could be a hell of an opportunity, maybe. You know, maybe it's to put your kid through college. Maybe it's to buy her, pay for a wedding. Maybe who knows what it's for. You know, silver and gold are two of the only forms of insurance that you can collect on without an event happening. You don't have to get into a car wreck or watch your house burn down. You can collect on it for an opportunity or an emergency. And if not, you are leaving a lasting legacy for your heirs. That's how I feel about it. And if you look at it in that micro perspective, oh, geez, it's down 50 cents today. I mean, yeah, it can be frustrating. It can be disheartening, even for looking at through a macro perspective, because it's very counterintuitive to the way it should be. But ask
Yeah.
yourself, if it's so counterintuitive to the way it should be, if the biggest money in the world is accumulating it while the four or
Right.
five central commercial banks suppress the price, and we know that to be the case, then is it more important? Because why are they suppressing it? And why are the big sovereign governments around the world standing for delivery, draining the exchanges, playing, you know, using the ninjutsu move, the leverage of the Western suppression against us? These are the bigger questions. And looking at just the price action, as we've said on your show, I don't know how many times, it is the greatest tool of misdirection.
I was about to say
You're
that. I was about
misdirected
to,
by the price when the big money is showing you the macro trend.
yeah. I loved when you said that, man. That always stuck with me. That always stuck
It's
with me.
true, though. I mean, if you
Yeah.
want to misdirect someone, it's very easy.
Yeah.
Most people don't lift up the hood and they just look at the paint job. And that's a problem. You know, you buy a new
Yeah.
car, if you don't look under the hood or have a mechanic look under the hood, well, you know, not very smart.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I started talking about the silver shortage back in like 2020, and nobody was really talking about it, especially that I was watching. And now everyone does. Even scientists are trying to, figure out stuff. Even NASA, it's crazy that nowadays it took, I think I think it took something like the biggest supply, like 2023 record-breaking supply deficits, 1.21 billion ounces. And I think now people understand the severity of it. Before they didn't understand that. And I think when they understand it to the degree where it's inevitable, like 2025, 2026, because every automobile company by the year 2030 will be electric, right?
You
And
know
if
why
we're
no one
already
understands it, though? No one understands it because the price is misdirecting. Well,
right.
if it's such in short demand, man, then why is it so cheap? Why isn't the price going up? And that's why it's such an effective tool. because they are able to control people's emotions by controlling the price. And emotions are much more of a motivating factor to most people than logic is. And, we're motivated by fear and greed, and fear being the strongest motivator. So people come in because they're greedy and they want to make money. Oh, everyone's talking about this being so undervalued, and then it loses value. Counterintuitively, they get scared, they sell. Motivation is everything, and the people pulling the strings understand this. But what they really didn't count for when they started suppressing the price is that half of the world would say, fine, we'll play your game, but we'll stand for delivery. And that is why there is a shortage up on the large exchanges.
Yeah, COMEX.
But it doesn't register with people, because I am saying best availability, lowest premiums we've had in years. Well, it hasn't trickled down yet. It will. And I'm very consistent. When will it happen? I think it'll happen when the next bank failure happens and the bank is bailed in. And no one understands, very, very few people even understand what a bank bail-in is, but it was written into law in the Dodd-Frank Act. And maybe you could put a link to the Dodd-Frank Act in the show description. Go through it. Look at what it says about bailouts. They're illegal. And that's why there was such outrage when Silicon and Signature were bailed out, because evidently Janet Yellen thought they'd bring down the whole system. So the bottom line is that bail-ins are the name of the game now, not bailouts. And I think that's when we see things really get crazy. When people say, my God, where do we put our money? And that's when everything like that disappears. And it goes from being flush to not, just like that, just that fast.
Connection established.